This is the documented record of Carey Mae Parker. Carey Mae Parker was 23 years old when she disappeared in March of 1991 from the Quinlan area near Lake Tawakoni in Hunt County, Texas. At the time, she was reportedly driving a 1980 Buick Skylark. What follows is not theory. It is what has been publicly reported, what has been documented, and what the timeline shows. Carey Mae Parker disappeared in March of 1991. According to later reporting, her family believed at the time that her disappearance had been reported and that an investigation had been opened. Years later, they learned that no proper missing person case had been filed in the way they believed. For nearly 2 decades, there was no active investigation attached to her name. That is where this record begins to separate from expectation. Because disappearance is one thing, but the absence of a record is something else entirely. By 2010, a missing person report was formally filed with the Hunt County Sheriff's Office. At that point, nearly 20 years had already passed. In 2019, the case received renewed attention. Investigators were assigned. Search efforts were conducted. Properties connected to individuals associated with Carey Mae Parker were examined using cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. The search had not stopped. It had shifted from institution to persistence, from system to people who refused to let the question disappear. Then, in February of 2021, something changed. Carey Mae Parker's vehicle, a 1980 Buick Skylark, was recovered from Lake Tawakoni. The vehicle was found submerged near the White Point area. For decades it had remained there, unseen, unaccounted for, part of the landscape. Then, in October of 2021, divers returned to the area. During that search, human remains were recovered in connection with the site. The remains were sent for analysis. In May of 2022, Carey Mae Parker's children publicly stated that DNA evidence confirmed the remains were their mother's. That is where the record becomes clear again. Not complete, but no longer missing. A disappearance that had lived for decades without resolution now had an answer. But the timeline does not end where the answer appears. Because the question is not only what happened to Carey Mae Parker. The question is how long the record was allowed to remain incomplete. A woman disappears in 1991. A report is not properly established in the way her family believed. Nearly 20 years pass before a formal case is filed. Another decade passes before her vehicle is recovered. And more than 30 years pass before her remains are identified. That is the timeline. That is the record. And the record does not raise its voice. It does not accuse. It does not speculate. It simply shows how long a system can function with a missing piece and continue to move forward as if the absence is acceptable. The lake did not forget. The vehicle remained. The evidence remained. The truth remained in place. What changed was not the location. It was the attention. This is not a mystery story. It is not a theory. It is a record of delay, a record of absence, a record of how a question can remain open for decades as long as enough people continue living around it. Because a system does not fail all at once. It fails quietly, in gaps, in assumptions, in moments where something is believed to have been done, but wasn't. And in the space between what should exist on paper and what actually does. Carey Mae Parker's story now has an ending, but the timeline that surrounds it is its own kind of record. One that shows exactly how long a county can live without answers, as long as someone else keeps asking the questions. My name is Wakefield, and this is the Hunt County Signal. If there is a case, a record, or a timeline in Hunt County that never sat right with you, leave it in the comments, because around here, the truth doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it just waits to be found.